Once the richest man in America, Howard Hughes would spend his fortune on seemingly outlandish and destined-to-fail projects from film to aircraft. Yet he's remembered more for his downfall in the last 26 reclusive years of his life. When it comes to the original eccentric billionaire, it's a bit difficult to separate fact from fiction. For starters, his birth certificate can't be trusted. Records say he was born on December 24, 1905 in Houston, Texas, but Hughes was actually born on September 24, 1905 in Humboldt, Texas. Other lies include being a triplet and the illegitimate son of his aunt. He himself would say all this to add to the mystery around him. In reality, he was the legitimate son of Howard Sr. of Missouri, a businessman who got into the oil business after fleeing the angry father of a girl he tried to seduce. With the Texas oil boom, he flipped cheap land for 10 to 100 times the amount he bought it for. With that money, he founded an oil company in Houston and married a woman who had a touch of mental illness with insect phobias and germophobia. This did not bode well for their son. What would bode well was not only the oil fortune of his father, but Hughes Sr.'s invention of the Hughes drill bit, which brought in millions. However, as Howard Hughes Jr. inherited partial deafness, he was more introverted, so his father sent him to private school, where he still didn't fit in. He was characterized as a snobbish bore and a sissy, but he was also pretty good with that era's tech. He put together a wireless radio transmitter when he was only 11 years old, followed by a motorized bicycle. However, his father was still worried about him, so he sent him off to the Boy Scouts. Oddly enough, in the mountains of Pennsylvania, he took to the outdoor life, excelling in the military-style discipline of the camp. This may be in part due to being away from his overprotective mother. But it wasn't until 1920 that he would discover one of the great loves of his life. At 14, he won a bet with his father over a college rowing competition, and as his reward took a flight on a flying boat. He would spend a great deal of his future building and flying aircraft. By 19, Hughes was an orphan, his mother dead of complications from an ectopic pregnancy, and his father from a heart attack. In an era where the age of adulthood was 21, Hughes was declared an emancipated minor and inherited his father's company and fortune. He dropped out of college to run the business, but oil wasn't for him, so he hired someone else to run it. With his late father's fortune, he got his pilot's license and turned to Hollywood with its bedazzling glitz and glamour. He hired Louis Milestone to a 3-year contract, created his first film, Two Arabian Nights, and claimed an Academy Award in 1927. Flush with success, Hughes decided to fuse planes and films by writing, producing, and directing the world's first aviation movie, Hell's Angels. It was to be his masterpiece, and he poured everything into it. He got an air fleet that surpassed that of some countries. However, Hughes had compulsions that made him fixate on cloud formations to the point he'd throw out perfectly good footage and force reshoots until the clouds were right. In addition, he nearly died on set when he took a scout plane up that went into a tailspin and came crashing back to Earth. He walked away unharmed, but it would not be his last plane crash. As Hughes' obsession with perfection ran away with him, Hollywood made the transition from silent films to talkies. This required a complete scraping of his work to accommodate sound. This actually also proved to be the breakthrough the leading lady, Harleen Carpenter, needed. The original actress was replaced due to her Norwegian accent, a fate not uncommon during the transition. The film would turn Carpenter into Jean Harlow, the platinum blonde bombshell of the 1930s. Hell's Angels would finally be released in 1930, smashing the box office and earning an Academy Award nomination for Best Cinematography. However, 2 flops and a divorce in there followed it before Hughes again struck gold with Scarface, capitalizing on the public's fascination with gangsters. It was a film filled with violence and obscenity, which the censors hated. So Hughes sued them and won. He would also later outrage them with his film The Outlaw, where he personally ensured the leading actress' costumes were cut very low. After Scarface, Hughes returned to his other interest, flying. In 1934, he entered and won a flying race in Miami, Florida. This fueled his desires, and he founded Hughes Aircraft Company. He now wanted to build the world's fastest racing plane. This resulted in the H-1, with which he broke the world speed record of 352 miles per hour on August 18, 1935. By 1938, he set his sights on another first, the fastest flight around the world. So he modified a Lockheed 14 and set off with a hand-picked crew, flying from New York to Paris, then Moscow, and Siberia. They arrived back in New York after 3 days, 19 hours, and 14 minutes, setting yet another record. Unfortunately, the introvert's reward was 3 days of parades, parties, and people generally being nuisances across the country. In 1940, Hughes would move into commercial airlines with Trans World Airline, and then the US government asked if he could provide plane parts and ammunitions for World War II. Later, they would also ask him to design and build a massive flying boat to fight the German U-boats. Hughes was also now exhibiting some odd, mildly concerning behaviors. Compulsive hand-washing, constantly rechecking his work, and trying to make things perfect. In short, he had OCD. The amount of stress from an expanding business empire didn't help, and his obsessions were making things worse. 2 contracts were both over budget and overdue thanks to his constant tinkering and insisting that he personally test the planes. This would also result in another near-death plane crash when a propeller malfunctioned during testing, and the plane plunged through the roof of a house in LA. Hughes didn't walk away from it. He was saved from the burning wreckage and rushed to a nearby hospital. He suffered multiple burns, fractures in his neck, and severe head trauma. To control the pain, Hughes turned to drugs: codeine, Valium, and Empyrean. He took all 3 daily for the next 30 years. However, they couldn't prevent the side effect of his OCD spinning out of control. By the 1940s, things were going downhill. His health severely impacted his businesses, and he was turning into a recluse. One of his last public appearances would be in front of Congress when he was subpoenaed over alleged misconduct with government contracts. Now in his 50s, Hughes was deteriorating. With a refusal to shake hands and rages when things weren't perfect, his underlings believed he was going insane. Even the FBI was compelled to keep tabs on him, saying he acted like a screwball paranoiac, and suspecting him capable of murder. It's believed he now announced he was going to marry the starlet, Jean Peters, one of many he had been seeing over the years, in order to stave off people committing him to an asylum. Less than a year later, Hughes went to view movies in a darkened screening room on Sunset Boulevard and didn't leave for 4 months. When he finally emerged in 1958, he looked and smelled like a homeless man, despite his obsession with hygiene. He then checked into the Beverly Hills Hotel and remained there for several years, where he continued the habits he picked up during the previous 4 months, namely sitting naked in the dark and only communicating through handwritten notes. It was during this time that he also added morphine to his drug mix. Then in 1966, he sold his shares in Trans World Airline, became the richest man in the US, and decided to move to Las Vegas to buy Las Vegas. By 1971, his second marriage ended with Jean Peters divorcing him. Hughes himself moved to a London hotel room and went on a naked flight. It would be his final flight. He increased his dependency on drugs and then lost his ability to walk. Hughes would die in the air flying to Houston, though not as a pilot, for medical treatment on April 5, 1976. Autopsies revealed the level of neglect he imposed on his body: damaged kidneys, malnutrition, and bed sores. In addition, 5 broken needles were found inside his arms. Despite allegations that he faked his own death, Hughes was quite dead, and was buried in Glenwood Cemetery in Houston. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you're interested. There's always more history.